Alright, here is my story. I grew up in a ranch in the middle of nowhere. We had plenty of neighbors, but our ranch was the deepest and furthermost one into the woods. If you kept going after our ranch, you would only see thick woods and eventually reach a military base after a few hours near the end of the county. This is not only my tale, but also involves my dad and my uncle Doug. I will begin with the events I experienced firsthand along with my sister and grandfather, then the ones that my dad experienced, and then finally, the events experienced by my uncle Doug. They all happen in chronological order, and I only came to learn about what Dad and Uncle Doug had seen a long time later. They both had their experiences individually, and Uncle Doug was the one who was most affected by all of this. To this day, he will still not really talk about these events, and only talks about what happened to him after a few packs of beer. To begin with, well, I guess it really starts with my mom. My mom comes from a weird family. Weird in the good and funny kind of way, most of the time. Her dad was an adventurer, the kind of dude that had a cowboy lifestyle and traveled all over the country doing all kinds of stuff. Granddad saw and did a lot of stuff. He even once claimed to have killed a werewolf and skinned the body to make a leather jacket, and it was a weird looking jacket, so we all believed him, even though the story probably is not true. Thing is, even being wacky and a trickster like him, Granddad had actually seen some stuff, and he sometimes pointed it out in a rather gloomy way. Grandmother, on the other hand, came from a Romanian family, and she was part Romani. Both Granddad and Grandma believed really deeply in the supernatural, whether because of Granddad's experiences or stuff that they saw. This rubbed off on my mom. So not only was my mom really superstitious, she also claimed to be paranormal sensitive. For instance, she would tell us that when they first moved into the ranch, she would hear hooves and chains walking all over the roof. She would tell us about a nicely dressed man that sometimes sat on a log beside our house, smoking a cigarette only to walk away and vanish whenever anyone approached, and many other stories too. My dad, of course, never experienced or saw any of this, so he would chalk it up as my mom telling us a horror story. My mom was also a horror movie/book aficionado, and Uncle Doug would laugh, as he never saw it either. Granddad and Grandma, on the other hand, would nod, even though they themselves said they never saw anything. Thanks to all of this talk, me and my sister were always creating fictional monsters and crap to mess with each other. I won't deny, the place that we lived in was spooky, as are all wooden areas, but we got used to it pretty quickly. After all, we lived there. It wasn't until we were around 7 years old that we had our first incident. Dad and Uncle Doug had started clearing a big patch of high grass directly behind our homes. There had been a break-in at a few neighboring ranches, and since Uncle Doug, whose cabin was closest to the high grass, had a bunch of expensive car parts in his garage, Uncle Doug owned a car repair shop and really liked custom cars. They figured it was best to clear the high grass right up into the tree line so that nobody could approach our homes at night unconcealed. It took them a few days, but on the first day, they had already got a big part of it done. It was late afternoon. Me and my sister were playing outside in our yard, with a front view of Uncle Doug's cabin, and henceforth, the woods and high grass. We were waiting for our parents to get ready, because we were going into town to watch Harry Potter. So me and my sister are just doing kid stuff, when my sister stops dead in her tracks and starts looking at the high grass. She points. I turn to look, and I see this figure standing there, motionless. It was against the sun, so all we could see was its outline. It was big, and looked vaguely like a person, but yet, from that distance, it almost seemed like a big dead tree, but we never remembered having a tree stump there. We are staring at this person-like silhouette, when I guess both me and my sister got really unnerved. We ran to our porch and asked one another what the hell that was that we just saw. That's when we hear the sound of grass parting, and then we hear footsteps coming from that high grass. We yelled and ran inside at the same time. My dad comes outside with his shotgun, so does Uncle Doug. We tell them about the figure and then about the footsteps. They go outside to investigate. My dad sees nothing and goes back inside. My Uncle Doug spends a while looking around, thinking it might have been a robber. He finds nothing and goes back to doing whatever he was doing. My sister and I chalked it up as the wind or something. Later that night, we are in our room. We shared a room as kids, as our house was not exactly that big. We are up late, talking about the Harry Potter movie and how we want to go to Hogwarts and shit, when we hear this wet thump on the window. We look at each other. Maybe it was the cat. Sometimes it did that from inside. Maybe it was locked outside and doing that to get in. So, my sister pulls back the drapes to take a look and jumps back as if she received a shock. There, on the window, was a pale, fleshy, and wet hand. It was just laying against the glass. Whoever the hand belonged to was out of sight. It was crouching down low, and we could not see it. It just had its hand raised up into the air and on the glass. We stood there staring for a few minutes until the hand started tapping its fingers on the glass. My sister was brave enough to jump up and pull the drapes closed again at that point. We sat there terrified for a while until we heard a muffled laughter coming from outside. Then we heard the sound of someone pulling the window up. I think screaming too much makes you zone out, because all I remember after that is our grandfather kicking our door in, shotgun in hands, and turning white when he looked at the drapes, which were now fluttering in the wind thanks to the open window, which we did not open ourselves. My grandfather regains his posture, moves towards the window, fires a shot outside, and then yells, "I am calling the police." The police arrive. They look around with my dad and Uncle Doug. Once again, nothing is found. My granddad refuses to describe who he saw, just grunting and nodding whenever asked. My granddad never told us what he had seen. From the door, he must have had a good look, as whatever the thing was standing there and pulled the window up. He installed deadbolts on the windows and told us to make sure that those were locked at all times. Fast forward a couple of days. I am sitting in Uncle Doug's chair watching him and my dad cut down the high grass. When out in the edge of the woods, I spot what seems to be some kind of a white-furred animal sprinting towards my dad. It was huge. I could not make out the details fully, but I could see the top of its back and the grass parting in front of it. It was white and furry. I stand up and yell at the top of my lungs. My first thought was that it was a bear of some kind, and it was charging my dad. My dad looks up at me confused, not making out anything I'm saying. He turns around, looks around, and then comes over. The grass is still. There is no sign of the animal that was charging just a minute ago. I start telling him about it, and he just looks at me, saying, "Uh-huh," and then goes back to work. He never thought that there was actually an animal, and just presumed that I was imagining things. Years later, my dad would tell me what he had just seen, just a day after the one above. It was late afternoon, the sun was already down, and my dad was out clearing the last patch of high grass, right up in the tree line. He was nearly done when he started noticing what he described as a thick, copperish smell. At first he thought the grass trimmer he was using was malfunctioning, but even after turning it off, the smell kept getting stronger. He looked around for the source of it, and directly behind him, standing in the shadow of the tree line, was what looked to be a person. He could only make out its outline, but it was a human silhouette. It was clearly a man, bare-chested, standing with his arms half open at his sides. What was off about the thing was that it appeared to either have horns or what looked like tree branches sprouting from behind its head. My dad yelled for whoever was there to show themselves or get the hell off of his property. The figure said nothing, and Dad noticed it seemed to close the distance quite fast without actually moving. He never saw the thing move its legs or start running. It just kinda jumped from spot to spot, like 1 second it was there, the next second it had moved. Dad had the bladed grass trimmer instead of the cord version, so he heaved it up and prepared to use it as a weapon. He once again yelled for whatever it was to get out of the property and started calling for Uncle Doug. That moment, he states the thing simply turned its back on him and quickly ran towards the woods, without seeming to move its legs again. It made what he described as an animalistic, trumpeting sound just before it disappeared. My dad walked back home and tried to figure out what it was. He ended up concluding that it was a hobo and that he was just tired and imagined all of the rest. The thing I forgot on the last part is that the smell vanished when the thing ran away. It became stronger, according to my dad, as it was advancing, and then the smell instantly vanished, along with the thing once it ran away. Now for Uncle Doug's part. who happens to be the one who had the longest incident with whatever it was. Let me describe my Uncle Doug just a little bit. Obviously, Doug is not his real name. Uncle Doug was your usual lumberjack-looking dude, tall as sin, big bushy beard, built like a brick wall, somewhat with a gut, but still intimidating. Uncle Doug was the honey badger of the family, as in, he did not care. The man was the kind of guy that could run his own hand through with a screwdriver, then go have a beer with the thing still in his hand. Uncle Doug was tough, is what I'm trying to say. One day, a while after my dad had this experience, Uncle Doug was out in the woods for whatever reason. He had his gun and his dog with him. He had spent most of his day outside doing outdoor survivalist crap, and I do believe he intended to camp out that day because he had brought a tent and a sleeping bag with him. It's about 5, and Doug is preparing to set camp for the night. He is in the process of getting a fire started and setting his tent when he starts feeling a weird smell. Guess what? It's that same copperish/metallic smell that my dad smelled the other day. Doug actually described it as the smell that you get when you heat up a piece of iron with a blowtorch, or if you left on one of those old clothes irons and you left it to run hot for too long. The smell goes on for about an hour as Doug sets up camp. He is scratching at his head trying to figure out where the smell is coming from. All the while, it's getting progressively stronger. And then his dog starts losing it. It starts barking and recoiling in fear all at the same time. Doug goes over to try and calm him down and nearly gets his hand bitten. He starts yelling at the dog to quiet down when he notices that there is someone standing in front of them, just far away enough to be barely visible at the light from the fire. In that light, he could only see its lower half up to its waist, and it appeared to be a naked woman. At first, Doug thought it may have been some woman who got lost or kidnapped into the woods by some rednecks, and his first thought was of offering help, but the way the dog is freaking out makes him keep his distance. He asks her if she is okay, and he gets no response. He asks again, and she starts heaving in response. He grabs his gun from the floor, and when he turns back to look at the woman, she is suddenly way closer. Now he can fully see her, completely naked, not injured as far as he can tell, staring and smiling at him. Doug is getting really creeped out and tries to touch her in the shoulder, only to find her back in the place where she was at first. He never even saw her move. Doug talks to her again, and she still remains silent and gives no answer. Doug decides to leave and starts getting his stuff together. He turns for a moment to get the dog's chain from where he tied it, and the minute he turns back, she is right in his face. He backs away, tugging at the chain to get the dog close to him, but once he turns to look again, she is nowhere to be seen. Doug decides to book it and leaves with only the dog, the gun, and a flashlight. It's about 7 o'clock and completely dark. Doug is walking through the woods, flashing the light in all directions, with the dog still freaking out and that strong metallic odor still present. He keeps seeing a shaking silhouette in the corner of his vision, edging closer, but nothing is there when he turns to look. The smell is still there, and he starts hearing muffled voices, as if someone is talking really far behind him. Farther down the trail, he starts hearing this heavy thumping sound, as if a large bull is charging at him. He turns quickly, and something slams him in the chest. All of the air goes out of his lungs, and he loses the chain, and the dog just abandons him. It just runs all the way away. Scrambling to his feet, he hears that thumping sound circling him, and, getting the gun and the light, scrambles up a tree. The smell is still unbearably strong, and Doug can hear the impatient thumping at the base of the tree. He reaches a branch large enough to sit on, and fires 2 shots down at random. The thumping dies down, and Doug starts scanning the area with the flashlight. He cannot see anything anywhere. A few minutes pass by, and the voices come back. They are really far away at first, then they are around him, then they are at the very base of the tree. The woman is shaking and jerking her limbs in weird, quick motions, almost like she's having a seizure. She heaves and laughs, and Doug swears it sounds more like a goat making a trumpet sound than a laugh. He stays up there in that tree for the rest of the night. The smell starts to die down at around 2 a.m., and as the sun is coming up, it has vanished. However, he waits until midday before coming down. Shotgun in hand, he doubles back to his campsite only to find his tent and sleeping bag completely destroyed, as if something had trampled it several times back and forth. Doug books it to the ranch and does not tell anyone what had happened. He says the dog simply ran away. It had not come back, and that he had fallen down a creek. Later that day, my dad comes to talk to him and asks why he had come back in the middle of the night, only to head back again. Apparently, Doug had returned at around 3 a.m., called my dad from the yard in a super deep voice, and asked if the kids were okay. He had then apparently stood there in the shadows for a few long moments before returning to his cabin. My dad thought he had left early in the morning to go back for his stuff. Dad had assumed that Doug was drunk and thought nothing of it. Doug, however, was still sitting up the tree during that time. Which makes us ask ourselves the question of who the fuck had been there standing in the yard, asking about us, asking if us kids were all okay. Doug said nothing, although he later admitted he had never felt so scared about anything else in his entire life, and he never ventured into the woods ever again. We moved about 2 years later to Dallas, and nobody said anything or put two and two together until years later when we got together for a big family reunion when I was home from college and sat talking about our old home. Everyone was scared shitless of it, and I still feel uneasy talking about this. I was 15 years old when this happened. My mom is going out of town for a week. She's leaving me all alone, which I'm pretty excited about. I get the house all to myself. The first day is fine, but the first night I have a pretty messed up dream. The only part of the dream I remember is at the very end. There was this strange girl. She was insanely skinny, like she was super malnourished. She was as pale as death and had hair like grease. She starts snapping her head/neck and limbs in strange directions. She lets out a scream akin to the thing. The scream wakes me up. I can still hear it for a few seconds even after I wake up. I just shake it off as a bad dream. I go to make myself breakfast. I keep seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. I finish making my breakfast and go to take it back to my room. I glance down the hallway while walking to my room. The girl is just standing in the far corner of my mom's room. She snaps her neck up and stares at me. I get the hell out of there. I get into my room and slam the door behind me. I lock that shit up. I sit in my chair shaking for 30 minutes. I calm down eventually and decide it was just my head playing tricks on me because I knew I was definitely awake at this point. I finish eating and take my plate back to the kitchen. On the way to the kitchen, I cannot see my mom's room. On the way back, I have to have a look. She is on the other side of my mom's room now, closer to the door. She points at me with a backwards arm, her elbow facing upwards. I dive into the bedroom. That was no trick. I definitely saw that. I grab a rifle. I aim it at the door for what feels like an hour. Nothing bursts in. I decide it's safe enough to go back to browsing the internet with my rifle next to me. I do this for the rest of the day until it's late at night and I can no longer suppress my hunger. I bring the rifle with me to the kitchen and make a fine-ass dinner. On my way back, I see her again. She is in the doorway of my mom's room now. I stand watching her because I feel like hot shit holding my rifle. I look her over. Her arms are both backwards. Her right leg is entirely backwards. Her left leg is jutting out at a weird angle. This angers her, apparently. She snaps her jaw down. She lets out the exact same scream that she did in my dream. She starts dragging herself along towards me. I am really freaked out by this point. I jump into the room again, same procedure as above. I finish my dinner in my room, and just sat there, thinking over my situation. It's pretty obvious I can't call anyone and rant about having a spooky ghost girl in my house because no one would believe me. I decide that the only thing I can do is try to face it head on. Fast forward to the morning time. I try to stay up for the night. I eventually fall asleep in my computer chair. I have the exact same dream again, on a loop. When she screams, I wake up again. Once I fully come to, I can hear that the doorknob to my room is jiggling back and forth. I'm just so thankful I locked it. I aim my rifle at the door, and eventually the jiggling stops. By now I'm entirely losing it, thinking I am going to die. Luckily, she does not try anything else, and I just spend the rest of the night online again. I spend my time thinking over what I'm going to do when I face her. I live in a city, so I can't exactly shoot at her unless I absolutely have to. Someone will call the police and I will get in a lot of trouble. I decide the best thing to do is try to hit her with the bayonet on the end of my rifle. Dawn comes. It's time. I fix the bayonet. I charge out of the room and down the hallway, trying not to shit my pants. I charge all the way into my mom's room. She is not there anymore. I look all over my mom's room, trying to find her. She is nowhere to be found. I start heading back down the hallway to my room. She is in front of my damn door. I decide to stick with the original plan. I charge. I run right through her. I feel nothing but coldness. I run directly into my room and fall flat on the floor from the momentum. I look behind me to see what's happening. She turns slowly towards me. She starts walking into my room. I kick my door closed on her. She turns into a cloud of fog. I lay there for a while, just thinking. It's clear that I cannot hurt her. It's also clear that I don't want her to do whatever the hell it is she's trying to do with me. I decide that the best thing I can do is stay in my room until my mom comes home. Luckily, I was weird and had emergency supplies of food inside my room. It turns into a siege for the rest of the week. I cannot leave my room. Every time I fall asleep, I have the same crazy dream. Every time I wake up to her screwing with my door. As time goes on, it gets more and more aggressive. Eventually, it goes from jiggling the doorknob to slamming into the door with a loud bang. By the time of the 6th day, I've almost completely lost it. I have no sleep, and the constant stress is making me insane. It's nighttime on the 6th night. I know I just have a few more hours until my mom comes home, and then I will be saved. This thought relaxes me a little. I start fading and fall asleep. I have the same dream. I wake up at the same point. This time though, something is different. There is no slamming on my door. There is just dead silence for a few seconds. Then suddenly, there's a crash of breaking glass, and sounds like it came from my mom's room. I realize that this is actually happening, and not all inside my head. I grab my rifle and run out into the hallway. I can't see shit because it's so late and so dark. Suddenly, I see a shadow figure run out of my mom's room and into the cone of light coming from my room. I hear the scream again. I've completely lost it by this point. Bang, bang, bang. The shadow figure drops to the floor. I fumble with and eventually turn on the hallway light. There is a knife on the floor. The shadow figure that I saw, it was a human. There is a big pool of blood all around him from where I shot him. Between this and the 6-day siege, my mind just shuts off entirely. I pass out in the doorway to my room. I just cannot comprehend what has just happened. I can't believe I just shot someone, a real person. I wake up to someone shaking me. It's a cop. The neighbors had called when they heard shooting. I tell the cops what happened that night, and I completely omitted the previous 6 days with the shadow woman. The man I had shot was a known felon who had been breaking into homes to steal things. My mom comes home. The cops explain what happened to me, that everything is fine and I'm okay, etc., etc. After that night, I never again see the girl or have that dream. I'm still not sure what to think about all of this, if it was some sort of guardian angel or just my brain going haywire and it happened to be helpful. Big Black Canines. So, I've heard about black dogs showing up to some people before something bad happens. I have a couple of stories of my own and my family about the topic, if you are willing to listen. So this didn't happen to me. It actually happened to my mother. She had been seeing some really weird shit since childhood. She'd been having some weird half-premonition dreams since she was a kid. When she grew up, the dreams continued and started to become more precise. Dreams about people getting hurt, seeing a black dog around every single time that they got hurt. Bad things started to happen in real life, just like in the dream. Then things started to calm down a bit. Years later, she gets married. She starts seeing the dog in the dreams, but no premonition dream. Shortly after, she starts seeing the dog while awake, but only for a split second before it's no longer there. She has a terrible nightmare one night about father and brother dying in a car crash accident. She sees the dog continually in the dream. She wakes up and prays. Things calm down, probably for around a week. She tells her husband about the dream with all the details. He tells her not to worry about it. It was just a nightmare, honey. She keeps seeing the dog in the dreams for the next week. Father mentions that the company needed him for something in a depot close to his hometown. He is going to the next morning. Brother wants to go with him. He invites brother to come to the house that day. Brother comes. The neighbor's dog escaped and bit brother in the leg. It's not a life-threatening wound, but husband, who is a medic, takes him to a clinic to get treatment and a rabies shot just in case. Father went alone next morning because brother got bandaged. A couple of days later, father is returning home. He decides to drive early in the morning. He suffers a heart attack while driving. He loses complete control of the car. The car spins in the road and does a donut. A truck crashes into the front of the car, and her father dies, exactly like in the dream she had. The family are eventually called and informed, and she tells her husband what happened. She blames herself for not stopping her father. She saw that dog twice, but I'm not sure if the dog is dangerous, or if it's like the other person said, an expression of intuition and fear. I actually saw it once myself when a storm hit my school and made 2 big-ass pine trees fall into my classroom. I may as well tell you the story. So I think I was around maybe 8 years old when this happened. I was at school. I always sit close by to the window because it lets me see the trees, and I could see the squirrels that lived in the trees running around. My teacher did not want me to sit there because I always got distracted. One day, the clouds darkened the sky. I could tell that rain was coming. It was nothing out of the ordinary at first. The wind started to pick up. The teacher closed the windows because of the wind. It was really strong and rattling the windows. Shortly after that, I saw a black dog watching me from a distance. I ignored it at first, but I kept looking at the dog out of the corner of my eye. The wind became stronger. I stood up and saw the dog. I instinctively walked away. The teacher angrily told me to sit down. I used to be a really, rebellious kid. A few seconds after that, a strong wind hit the windows. The wind was strong enough to break one of the windows, the one that I was closest to. The wind was strong enough to break the tall pine trees. They fell on the roof, breaking it, making sheet metal, ceiling, and branches fall all over us. We ran outside the classroom. Some of the kids were hit by the debris, mostly minor cuts, but one kid got a really deep cut in his head. The teacher tried to calm us down and guided us to an empty classroom that was not affected. Eventually, the storm passed by. The school called all of our parents. My mom came for me that day. 20 kids in total got traumatized. That one kid with the deep cut had to be taken to a clinic. This was a private school, by the way. The parents were outraged. We did not have classes again for 2 weeks. The school was deemed unsafe for children until they cleaned it and repaired the classroom. I managed to get out of that unscathed. While going back home, I told my mom about that scary-looking dog I saw before the event. She looked like she had a preoccupied face for a second, worrying about something, but then she quickly returned to normal. That expression was ingrained into me, and years later, I asked my mom all about it, about why she reacted like that to what was probably just a child's imagination. She told me that in the very same day, she saw a big black dog inside the house. She told me that the family dog was barking a lot that day. She was cleaning her room and tending to my younger sister. She saw that the family dog was barking at the house through a window. She told me that she saw a big black dog inside the house, inside the living room. She ran from my sister because of her mother instinct. She could not find the black dog afterwards. She then prayed for the safety of her family, her husband, and her kids. Guys, are we cursed, or was that dog just trying to warn us?